Okay, I think we can go ahead and get started. As I mentioned before, good afternoon, good evening, good morning to all of us who are connecting from around the world, and especially to those of us who are here in person in New York City for this session, Unlocking Multi-Level Governance for Climate Action, Insights from Scotland. The event today is going to focus on the ever-important issue of multi-level governance. So we know that multi-level governance, meaning on multiple scales, but also intersectoral, right? Horizontal and vertical integration is essential. It's a critical building block for climate action. However, we also know that there are significant barriers and significant gaps towards effectively implementing a multi-level approach, not only in Scotland, but in everywhere around the world, right? This is a perduring challenge. So the session here today will be launching a deep dive into a case study that's being published that was developed by the Scottish Government, the Scottish Climate Intelligence Service, ClimateView, and ICLEI to capture how this system of multi-level governance has gone from theory to practice in Scotland in connecting with the 32 different local authorities that are active within Scotland. We'll hear how this combined and very unique approach to both institutional arrangements, stakeholder engagement, as well as enabling technology has been really effective in bringing multi-level governance to the fore and implementing an effective model that we think can be replicated and serve as a very clear lesson for other governments around the world. We'll look forward as well to an engaging dialogue amongst the several experts and panelists that we have with us today, and see how these lessons from Scotland can apply to the various contexts from everywhere from which everyone is connected here today. So without further ado, I would like to hand the floor to Cabinet Secretary Gillian Martin. She's Cabinet Secretary for Climate Action and Energy in the Scottish Government. Cabinet Secretary, we're really pleased that you're able to join us today. We know that you have a very busy and hectic agenda here in New York, but I would invite you to open our session and provide a bit of your perspective on the importance of this work.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much. Thanks very much. My thanks to Mark MacDonald for the hosting, not just of this panel session, but many of the Scottish Government meetings this week. Really sincerely thank you for that. So on the theme of multi-level governments, it's really a central pillar of Scotland's approach to climate action. We're well beyond the targets and the net zero year and the pledges that we all wanted to make in terms of our ambition. We're now at the action point. In fact, we're probably behind. So we have to actually make sure that what we actually want to achieve is doable. And of course, government, high-level government can't do on its own. It has to be that multi-level approach to things. So we're proud to be a leader in this space. We've halved our emissions within Scotland since the 1990 baseline, but obviously it's the hard stuff still to be done. None of it's been easy, but listen, all the low-hanging fruit that has been hanging has now been picked, and we're now dealing with the tricky stuff. So that progress obviously driven by national policy, but it is enabled, and the action actually happens at a local level. So if you take, I'll give you some examples. If you take energy and waste, so these are two sectors where national and local government work very, very closely together. And we have delivered real change in both those areas and received quite substantial reductions in emissions. And that collaboration between national government, not just in terms of policy, but funding associated with the policy and the actual implementation of the policy at local level is working, and it is genuinely delivering. Responsibility for up to 80% of the actions needed to cut emissions lies with local government. We've got 32 local governments in Scotland, and they are basically delivering on the ground. And that's a pattern that's replicated across a lot of countries. Obviously, some countries have more local government, they have smaller local government, but really, I think that's probably the common thread is that it's the local government that are actually delivering on the action. So local authorities in Scotland have been leading in climate action. All 32 signed our climate change declaration in 2007. Many of them, most of them, have their own targets with regards to emission reduction as well, and some of them are even more ambitious than national government. Glasgow have obviously hosted COP26, but even before that, they weren't just in that space of delivering on ambition because they hosted COP26. They're already doing that, and they continue to do that. I'm delighted the city is represented here today. Full disclosure, I went to Glasgow University. I'm not playing favourites, but it's one of the best cities in the world. So our presence in New York's been supported by McDonald, partnered with the Glasgow City Council and ClimateView to develop the city's net zero route map. And ClimateView also supported the Sustainable Dundee Partnership in shaping its climate action plan as well. So all these efforts are part of that broader story, the sort of Scottish Cities Alliance, and that's a unique collaboration between our 8 cities and our government, and that's forging a sort of stronger, more coordinated relationship. There's also, information sharing, lessons learned sharing, I suppose supporting one another as well is absolutely critical. The heart of this is our climate delivery framework that brings together cabinet ministers like myself and some of my colleagues, local authorities and city leaders to align ambitions and coordinate deliveries, but also to push ourselves to go further. And certainly the opportunities that I've had in my role being part of this framework, we've actually often challenged each other. Where can we go further? How can we maximise the opportunity associated with some of the things that we want to do? Last week, can I give you an example? As a result of Glasgow's ambition and them setting out publicly what their ambition is, I can tell you that one of the Hitachi I was in Japan. Hitachi actually said to us the reason why we are basing ourselves in Glasgow, where we could have gone to any other European city, is because of Glasgow's net zero ambition. That was the big thing, that they want to be somewhere that has got the drive and the commitment, and I think that blew me away. I thought, well, this is actually tangible investment going in because of a climate ambition. The cornerstone of the collaboration and much of the enabler of the collaboration is the Scottish Climate Intelligence Service, and that was launched last year as a major step to build that shared capacity, but also that intelligence, effectively, as the title says, in how to and where to get the biggest areas of change as well. So delivering that sort of enabling expertise between national and local government. And the feedback that we've had from elected members has been really, really positive in that. They're engaging with the service, they've got a digital platform, they are using it to visualise what their net zero futures might look like, communicate that climate action with their communities. And so that feedback that we've been getting, and only within only a year of it, has really been quite very encouraging, actually. I want to, after I've concluded my remarks, I think the more powerful testimony is going to be from the people who've actually used the service, and you'll be able to hear the tangible difference that it has made. I think we've got to recognise that local authorities are doing so much that often they don't have the capacity or the expertise within each individual local authority. So we need to be quite agile in how we actually give them the access to the expertise with making the right decisions in the right policy area, and to be able to sort of disseminate that information to the people making decisions. So and embedding all that expertise at every single level, so that people are making fundamental decisions about planning, or where they put investment, or how they deliver on a particular policy. Could be to do with anything, could be to do with schools, it could be to do with infrastructure, that they have got that sort of expertise behind them, and they have that knowledge of what impact they're actually doing, or how they can make more impact if they maybe go in a different direction or whatever. So I think that we're at the very early stages of this, but the impact of it already, even within a year, has been critical. And I'm as excited as anyone else to hear the individual case studies and feedback from those that have used the service.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Cabinet Secretary. Very relevant remarks, and always a pleasure to hear about Scotland's leadership I should have mentioned before, my name is Jordan Harris. I represent Regions 4. Scotland is currently the presidency of Regions 4 as well. And so the influence and the reach that Scotland has now will be as well, global through this network. And we hope that this will serve as an example to all of our members from around the world on how, in this case, devolved national governments can provide the enabling conditions, right, that allow for a multi-level approach to really take shape. But now let's dive in, right? So we have with us here connected people who have been involved in developing the system and implementing the system and using the system. So I'd like to hand the floor now over to Clare Wharmby. Clare is joining us virtually online. Clare is Program Co-Director of the Scottish Climate Intelligence Service. So Clare, you are here. Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly. So
Lovely.
The Scottish Intelligence Service blends technology, peer learning, and institutional support. I was wondering, Clare, if you could talk a little bit about what lessons stand out to you in terms of taking this work into practice. I understand you have a presentation, so please go ahead. The floor is yours.
I'm hoping that you can see my slides.
Yes, we can.
Yes, awesome. So thank you very much, and thank you to the Cabinet Secretary for your opening remarks. As I said, my name is Clare Wharmby. I'm the co-director, one of the co-directors of SCIS. And first of all, if I can just talk a little bit about the problem that we're trying to solve. So what is the problem of climate change? What kind of problem are we dealing with? I think for a long time, we've been trying to solve this as a kind of a moonshot problem, where we've got a really clear goal that everyone agrees on, that the complex technology can be broken down into really discrete programmable steps, and we can deliver this by a relatively small defined team. I think what we're really realizing now is that this is not that kind of problem. This is a how do we make people happier problem. And that sort of problem is one where we've got really complex outcomes that are actually surprisingly hard to agree on. The technology that we need is often quite simple, but we've got really complex system interactions around implementing that technology. And really, this is only deliverable by local and national government and other stakeholders and partners acting coherently. So when we start to think about this problem in a different way, we start to think about the solution in different ways as well. What I'm going to do is go and talk through the case study that we've developed. And really, I just want to focus on what lessons we've learned from delivering and developing this service. So primarily, SCIS is a capacity building programme, which is supporting the planning and delivery of area-wide emissions reduction. We're not really a data programme. We have a lot of data, we use a lot of data. And many of my colleagues love data, but we're also a people programme. We're about kind of building capacity and supporting the delivery of this really complex problem across multi-layers of governance. How are we doing that? Well, the first thing that we did was we built a shared mandate. This was really important. We are jointly funded and co-designed by the Scottish Government and all 32 local authorities. So there was a huge kind of phase of co-design of really thinking about what is it that we need this programme to do? How do we want it to work? What kind of, sort of structure would be the most effective? And that was a kind of, it took us a while to do that, but it's been much, much easier now that we've got that shared mandate. We also did quite a lot of work around establishing legitimacy. The programme is delivered as a partnership between the Edinburgh Climate Change Institute and the Improvement Service, but we've worked really closely with other partners such as the Scottish Cities Alliance, the Sustainable Scotland Network and COSLA. And that's really helped us kind of get that understanding that we are a kind of player in this field. And then finally, about these bits, we're standardising without centralising. So using ClimateView as a platform has enabled us to start thinking about the development of local live plans that live in a standardised framework. Scotland has 32 local authorities that all cover very different areas. They have different communities, they have different emission sources, they have different economies. And what we're able to do with this platform is to kind of think about that problem as a kind of standardised problem, but with local solutions. So the next lesson that we had was really thinking about how do you pair technology with support? And the SCIS offers a variety of support to local authorities. The first is that capacity building. We deliver a lot of training, a lot of support through a team of local leads and through our data team. And that is enabling us to build capacity and confidence in local authorities to use the platform for action. The second thing is that we're using this data platform, and that gives us a really common language and framework, and we build it on a standardized inventory. And this means that everybody's working off the same kind of playbook, which means that we can provide much, much better insights back to government about what local authority is doing. We also are supporting local authorities to think about breaking down their big net zero targets into transition targets. So thinking about how do we think about the transition of, for example, electric vehicles or walking and cycling or heat pumps as a kind of unit of delivery. And then we start to think about how do we surface interventions to deliver those. So we're looking at how do we understand what is what have we got on the ground to deliver those transitions? Do we have enough? Do we have sufficient action? Is it funded? And again, we can provide those insights back and forth with national government. And then the final thing is with this is that this is about providing a community of care. It's sometimes a scary, lonely job being a climate change officer in local government. And SCIS very much see our role as supporting those officers, encouraging them, validating them, supporting their decision making and their data sets, challenging them when we need to, co-creating the solutions with them, and also talking up the solution of climate change. It's like we've spent a lot of time thinking about the problem of climate change, but climate change brings an enormous opportunity for local solutions to other really difficult problems, such as fuel poverty, childhood poverty, clean air, green jobs, health and well-being. There is an array of things that we can do and deliver through using climate solutions, and it's up to us to kind of talk up those options. And then finally, it's often also about enabling this two-way data flow and engagement with other stakeholders. So we've got our 32 local authorities using ClimateView, which means that we can start to map their transition targets and interventions, which means that we can then work with the Scottish Government to answer some questions. So we can think about whether the local government targets are really consistent with the delivery of climate change budgets. So do we have enough kind of ambition at local government level to deliver the targets? Do we know which policy areas are being delivered by interventions? Can we create a heat map of interventions to show which bits of policy are really working and which bits aren't? And then also look at whether national policy and funding are effectively aligned. So are we putting currently the money in the right places to deliver the action? Are we funding the bits that need to happen first? And that gives us this two-way data flow. We also think that longer term, there's going to be a really exciting piece where we start to think about how those local authority boards become real true area boards, where we start to feed in other interventions from other stakeholders in the area. We thought that was going to be a long-term thing, and actually we've got several local authorities already really keen to work with partners locally to say, right, what else is going on? What do we have on the local area? So that's really some of the lessons that we've learnt. Our case study is available to download. Here is the QR code. We also are quite active on LinkedIn. Please do follow us on LinkedIn, and we have a website as well. You don't really need to trust me on this. You can talk to Gavin Slater, who is also here. And Gavin is the head of sustainability at Glasgow City Council, and Glasgow has been one of the front runners of using ClimateView and to think about how they develop a route map. And they are now also really kind of active and supportive users of the SCIS service. So I will stop there and hand over to Gavin.
Thanks so much. You have a number of slides that I run through very quickly. Quickly, people understand what I'm saying. So, and instead of
Gavin, can you hear us? We're having a bit of a difficulty hearing you. It's a bit choppy. The audio. Is there? You can speak closer into the microphone.
If I do that?
Yes, much better. Much better. Yeah.
Okay, I apologise. So yes, I was just saying I won't share slides because I've got a huge amount of data and information that I could share with you, but I would have to speak so quickly that you would not understand a word that I'm saying. So instead, I will slow down and just give you the highlights. Speaking to what Claire has said and what the Cabinet Secretary said as well, Glasgow is an extremely ambitious city, and we have had ambitions to deal with the climate emergency since 2010 when we first established the Sustainable Glasgow Partnership. And with our initial target of reducing our emissions by 30% by 2020, when we reached that target in 2015, we started thinking about what's next. And the Scottish Government set the target of 2045, but Glasgow, keen to push on, set its target to be net zero by 2030. Now, this was a political ambition, and for officers like myself, we had to find a way to translate that into reality. So we commissioned the delivery of an integrated net zero route map, which we then procured Mott MacDonald's to do with us. And Mott MacDonald's brought in ClimateView. Now, I was very aware of ClimateView, having had spoke to ClimateView around COP26, and was keen to work with them. So this was a very exciting opportunity. And we commissioned this piece of work to look at a multi-vector whole city collaborative appraisal of the work that we were doing and the pathways that would get us to net zero. So we brought in all of our strategies, policies, and assessed them all, looking at the review across the whole sphere of everything that we're working on, transport, heat, energy, waste, everything, and looking at what we had in place and what would be the absolute limit of what we could achieve. And we had to do this in a way that would be scientifically rigorous. So we wanted to use the Science Based Targets Initiative. That didn't quite work. Deadline 2020 didn't quite work with our baseline years. So instead, we were able to utilise the ClimateView platform as our scientific approach to working out what the routes would be for us to get to net zero. The platform, once we had plugged in all of our information and worked across all of our various stakeholders, identified essentially through the various different transition elements that Claire alluded to, and the different subjects that we needed to tackle within those transition elements, 2 pathways for Glasgow. One projected pathway, which took all the plans, policies, and actions that we had in place already, which was called our projected pathway, and an accelerated pathway that took all of our ambition and maxed it out. So if money, resource, regulation, governance was not an issue, what could we possibly achieve? And ultimately, the projected pathway suggested that we would possibly get to a 60% reduction with a 40% residual emissions for sequestration, and the accelerated pathway would take us to 80% with a 20% residue. But going through that process also started to highlight other things. So those residual emissions gaps became really big issues because that's not something that we had as a council and the city began to plan for. And we realised the quantity of land that would be required to make such carbon sequestration or carbon storage. We do not have that in the city. And that was one of the first things that we were starting to look at with the Scottish Climate Intelligence Service and saying, we've gathered all this information, we've plugged it all into this programme. We now have the projected pathways, and we now know some of the bigger issues that pertain specific to Glasgow. But these are not going to be unique to Glasgow. These are going to be the same for our sister cities of Edinburgh and Dundee and Aberdeen. All of them are tight, compact cities, and they don't have a huge amount of space. Given that these are the economic engines of the country, we need to look at national approaches. So immediately we were starting to think, this is already beginning to deliver on that sort of multi-level issue of picking out the bigger picture and looking at, well, there are opportunities for us to collaborate and work with each other and address these things where in some of the areas in Scotland, they have more opportunity to sequester carbon and start to look at that. And that's just one example of the information that starts to flow out of the tool and the way that the Scottish Climate Intelligence Service can help us work across the country to look at these things. But there's been other benefits that have come from this as well. And Glasgow is one of only 2 cities in the United Kingdom to join the EU's 100 net zero and climate resilient cities alongside Bristol in England. And that is absolutely partly due to the fact that through the ClimateView work and the SCIS work, we were able to pull together a costed action plan for our journey to net zero. And that is an essential component of getting the mission city status. That in and of itself has opened up Glasgow's opportunity for more funding, more partnership, and more delivery on climate action. So working with the SCIS, working with the ClimateView platform has been a fantastic experience for us. It's identified where we are strong, it's identified where we need to do more, and we're recruiting more officers because of the data burden that comes with this and the amount of information and intelligence that's coming out of it and the amount of processing that we need to do and the opportunities that come with the SCIS. And I'll just finish up by saying this work also identified by pulling in other opportunities like our local heat plans, our opportunity to start looking at real innovation in terms of working with the private sector to address the climate issues in Glasgow, particularly in this instance around heat. And we're now investing a significant amount of money in Glasgow to build a climate delivery vehicle, to bring in the private sector expertise and capital, and all of the information that we do gather through this process and the procurement exercise that we're going through to set up that partnership. All of that at some point will be shared with the SCIS and will be shared with the rest of Scotland to make sure that all of the experience that Glasgow has gained through this process is equally open to the rest of Scotland, and Scotland can use that as well to look at how it might address those similar issues. So in summary, I would say it's been a wonderful experience using ClimateView. It brings a huge amount of opportunity and intelligence, but that is only augmented by the fact that we have the Scottish Climate Intelligence there as a critical friend for us to go and ask questions, to check our data, to check our sums, and to help us work collaboratively across Scotland.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Gavin. It's so encouraging, right, to hear directly from a local authority perspective, right, how this system has been so useful, how you've put it into place, and how it has allowed Glasgow to even strengthen, right, the role that it already has internationally in terms of climate ambition. We should mention that Gavin is head of sustainability of Glasgow City Council, so he's very much involved in this. And I think it's also really wonderful to hear this symbiotic relationship, right, between the intelligence service and in this case Glasgow City Council, and also how the system seems to have a multiplying effect, right, in that it's not only useful individually for one local authority, but how these examples will then be able to play a role in being replicated and having lessons learned from across Scotland and now around the world. I'd like to hand the floor now over to Tomer Shalit, part of the brains right behind this system, co-founder and chief architect officer of ClimateView. So Tomer, thank you first and foremost for being with us here in New York during Climate Week. So looking at this collaboration in Scotland, I'm wondering what kind of reflections you might have on the role that ClimateView has as the architecture for a transition like this that spans across varying levels and probably in many places around the world.
Well, sort of have to remind that the real heroes, so to speak, here, I think, is the climate intelligence services. Clare started saying this is about capacity building. We are an infrastructure provider. We have been providing a digital architecture, and by itself it'd be a computer. However, what I hope Clare saw, that SAS saw in us when they chose us, is the power of the power of structure, the power of shared language, and the power of being able to compare and to benchmark. The power, above all, I think Clare usually says that there is no price in reinventing the wheel. And I think in many ways, so what we're doing is we're trying to stop reinventing the same spreadsheets again and again, and make sure that we have a shared language that we can learn from each other, and then distribute that. But again, that's just an infrastructure. It's just as good as whoever chooses to use it. But I'm very happy we can be part of supporting Scotland in using it.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Tomer. I'd now like to hand the floor to Pourya Salehi, who I understand is also connected. Pourya, can you hear us all right?
Thanks a lot. And yes, I can hear you loud and clear. And thanks so much, Jordan, to you and to all the colleagues who shared their insights. Super useful. So I'm Pourya Salehi, the Head of Research and Innovation and Development at ICLEI. And for those of you who don't know ICLEI, ICLEI is the largest and the leading global network of cities with over 2,500 local and regional governments in more than 130 countries. And I'm also the co-chair of Research and Innovation at Technical Working Group of Research and Innovation at Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy. So we're talking about Scotland as a proof of concept here. So at ICLEI, we are proud to be involved in this case study as it shows what can be achieved when policy and institutional innovation are combined with technological innovation. And the Scottish Climate Intelligence Service and Clare and colleagues demonstrates that level of that multi-level governance can be made operational. I think we talk a lot about multi-level governance, but when it comes to operationalization of it, we believe there are still work to do globally. And I think this example showed how a country and different levels of governments in a given country can work together to operationalize that, connecting 32 local authorities with a shared framework and digital architecture. And obviously, technology is just an enabler and not the whole story. Technology is essential, of course, and it makes alignment, data sharing, and monitoring feasible. But technology alone doesn't deliver climate transition. I enjoyed how Clare had framed it in her presentation, where she had a slide on paired technology with support. Indeed, technology must be coupled with governance reform in the form of institutional arrangement or rearrangement, mandates, and capacity building. And Scotland illustrates that synergy. And when it comes to scaling the approach, the lesson for other regions is not to copy Scotland, but to adapt the principle, build shared sort of backbones that align local action with national ambition. And this can be done at different scales and with different tools, depending on the context, obviously. And the transferable piece is the architecture of the collaboration. As Cabinet Secretary Gillian Martin rightly pointed out, local governments are delivering on the actions, and local governments are doing so much, but sometimes, as she rightly said, that some of them may lack the capacities or the expertise needed, and that's where the role of national governments, comes to the picture. They can put together a pool of resources and constant capacity building, and also a pool of shared tools, such as ClimateView, that's as Tomar framed is about the power of shared language. Not all cities need to develop, or as Tomar said, reinvent the wheel and have a climate view, but cities can use such a tools that exists and currently is working. As Gavin unpacked how ClimateView was useful for Glasgow, but also we know that ClimateView has been helping more than 250 cities. And of course, at ICLEI, we are working with ClimateView to extend their service to many more cities, including the 2,500 cities and local governments under our network. And back to the point that Cabinet Secretary mentioned, this is exactly how multi-level governance can reinforce a partnership space amongst different levels of government, leading to more effective multi-level climate action. This is by definition the operationalization of multi-level governance. And another interesting piece was the private sector funding that Gavin mentioned briefly. It is of course necessary to ensure private sector funding flows to support multi-level climate action. But yet again, that's where the role of national governments are very important. The patient public capital needs to flow to de-risk the investment for climate action on the ground to facilitate the flow of private sector money. And this is indeed defined in the context of a multi-level governance in broader sense. My department was commissioned by Global Environment Facility, Jeff, to conduct a study on different models and approaches to operationalization of multi-level governance in different countries. Part of Jeff and our colleague David, who's now with ClimateView, was also deeply involved in that. And we could see that there are sort of patterns globally, and one can learn from another where the success stories are emerging. So at the end, I think like it's about owning the narrative. At ICLEI, we see this not only as a technical exercise, but as a human one. Climate action must be framed as a human project about healthier cities, healthier air, safer streets, resilient communities, and better lives. And that narrative mobilizes people and makes policy stick and ensures innovations endure. So I would like to end my note with a call to action, as our role at ICLEI is to help other countries and regions to translate this model and embed it in their governance structure and adapt it to their capacities. And we need to scale this kind of initiative, not just as a technology pilot, but as a systemic shift that sort of marries institutional innovation with human-centered outcomes. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Thank you, Pourya. No, fantastic reflections and remarks, very inspiring. And of course, to know that ICLEI is involved and has that capacity, right, to translate these experiences and these lessons learned to thousands of local governments from around the world. And of course, worth mentioning, right, in the run-up now to COP30 at the end of the year, where the multi-level approach will be a strong aspect of our common LGMA positioning, LGMA being the common subnational space coordinated by ICLEI in the context of the UNFCCC. So we think that this can be a very strong example as well to bring to COP this year. So after all of these fantastic reflections and comments, I want to hand the floor back to Cabinet Secretary Gillian Martin. Before doing so, I'd like to remind everyone here in the room, as well as those who are connected, that after Cabinet Secretary's remarks, there will be an opportunity for questions to any or all of our panelists. So those of you who are in the room, you'll have the opportunity to ask questions. Those of you who are online, we encourage you to please already start to maybe input your questions into the chat box, and we'll channel them along to the panelists as such. But now, Cabinet Secretary, I'm wondering if you can maybe walk us through some of your initial key takeaways or reactions to what we've heard on the panel today.
Well, I think it's the best things are always collaboration. That's where the action really happens. A top-down approach very, very rarely works in any situation. And you know, national government can set the policy, but we ask an awful lot of our local authorities. We ask them to effectively, you know, to deliver on the action on the ground. And we need to be able to enable them to do that. Now, obviously, we've got very skilled people. They're very close to the communities, obviously, by very nature of the entities that they are. But we have to recognise that, you know, like I mentioned before, that there might not be the specific expertise in, I suppose, the assessment of the action that they're taking. You know, to be able to know that what they're actually deciding on and what they're actually doing is actually going to make a difference in terms of reducing the emissions in their part of you know, whether it be Scotland or whether it be anyone else. So these are, they're not just enabling tools, they're enabling collaborations. You know, so I was really interested in listening to Glasgow's experience of it, where basically, you know, obviously they use the tools, but there's also that ability to ask questions and to put ideas forward and to get some feedback on how they can maybe be doing things differently. So they're maximising the activity that they're putting their efforts into. So I mean, it's great to see it in practice. It's great for me to be able to hear back. I mean, I haven't actually directly heard back the feedback as I have, and I guess one of the things that I'm hungry for is actually hearing from other local authorities as well as to what they've found it to be, because it could be that the SCIS becomes, you know, it may change and evolve based on the feedback that they get from local authorities. They might be even able to expand their capacity. We don't know. And I think it always has to, everything that we're doing around this has to be an iterative process. But it's been very interesting for me to listen to that feedback. It's essential for local authorities to be able to track the activity that they're doing and to be able to explain to the people who pay the council tax why they're doing certain things. If nothing else, you know, to be able to say, well, this is actually going to be the thing that makes a meaningful difference in these kind of key areas that you want us to work on as well. So it's, you know, it's year one. I think it's already been successful. I mean, what's it going to be like in year 3, 4, or 5? You know, is Glasgow, I mean, taking Glasgow as an example, is as they get to net zero by 2030, and what the lessons going to, you know, what richness of data and case study information that we're going to have that we'll be able to talk to cities that are maybe still on that journey getting to net zero based on the evidence associated in the collaboration between, like, you know, that city council and others within Scotland, and the SCIS as well. So, you know, inspirational and actually, you know, a reasonably small intervention unlocking quite a lot of potential as well. So maybe a model for how other cities and how other countries, particularly subnational governments, can learn from what we're doing.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Cabinet Secretary, for those reflections. And certainly this example will be a shining lighthouse, right? Not only for cities from around the world who still are well on their way in their journey towards net zero, but also this emerging dialogue around the post-net zero era, right? What comes after achieving net zero and how these benefits can then be expanded into other ways, right? And creating multiple co-benefits on a social and economic and even in environmental and ecological scale. So we're really interested to see as well the role that ClimateView and services like the Scottish Intelligence Service can play in that future. So with that, I would like to open the floor. The Cabinet Secretary has mentioned that she would be particularly interested to hear from other local authorities or cities who may be connected. So I'm not sure if we have any here in the room or any who may be connected online, but really anyone, the floor is open. If you have any questions, either for one or all of our esteemed panelists. Any takers in the room or online? Wave your hands here in the room if you would like to take the floor. Okay, here we go. We have one question from the virtual audience. Has there been interest from other regions or nations about the SCIS's joint approach? Is anyone aware of any other interest that has been expressed in replicating this model?
Yeah, yes. I would say so. I think the best example is ICLEI in the US, with now rolling in all their member cities, like 300. Of course, the nation isn't as harmonized as Scotland, but so it's not going to be a national aggregation, but it's the same core idea of capacity building, of, as Clare expressed, so do top down what you can do so we can support the bottom up approach. And I think that's sort of the theme that and actually the same in the Ruhr region in Germany and the same in Austria with a number of cities and the Netherlands. So yes, I think that it's interesting because each one of these examples are actually coming from different directions. The Netherlands is very much on shared KPIs. Austria has been very focused on capacity building. So it's emerging.
Wonderful, fantastic. Another incoming question here. This is Clare for the Scottish Climate Intelligence Service. What were some of the key components in getting many actors to agree on a single joint approach? So Clare, that question is directed to you.
You have to say no quite a lot. You're always going to be offered kind of pilots. Everyone wants to do a pilot because it's kind of considered low risk. I think we said no to 3 different pilot solutions. And the reason why we said no was because we could see that the local authority market was ripe for this kind of process and solution. And if we didn't gather them all at once, they would all go off in different directions and find a solution, which might have been different solutions. And it would have lost the opportunity to standardize. It's really difficult to get those back in the box once you've let them go. So we just had to keep saying no to pilots in order to say we want to do everything everywhere all at once. And so that was probably the one of the solutions. The other solution was that we had a huge amount of help from the other players in the Scottish ecosystem, like the Sustainable Scotland Network, like the Scottish Cities Alliance, and like COSLA, to really kind of like work with their existing networks to kind of sell the approach, to bring people on, to get people around a table and say, this is what we want to do. So I think it was, you know, a combination of, yes, no pilots, and really working with the existing partners who've got relationships to help you sell what you're trying to do. And once we'd done that, it was actually fairly straightforward.
Fantastic. Any questions here in the room? I've maybe, would you like to? Okay. I've maybe got a question back over to Gavin from Glasgow. Gavin, how was the interaction, or if you could maybe characterize a bit the interaction between Glasgow and other local authorities within Scotland around the use of this common joint approach? And was there any, you know, kind of mutual learning going on or sharing of experiences during the time that I know that, of course, you know, different cities are at different moments and levels of maturity, and Glasgow is certainly a front runner, but I'm wondering if, you know, there has been any kind of sharing of experiences and mutual learning between different local authorities in this context.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So we, as Scottish local authorities, so Clare mentioned many of the different forums, like the Scottish Cities Alliance, that we already communicate across. So there's always been a platform or forum of some type, but generally they attend to a specific issue, adaptation or mitigation or something else. What really attracted us to the idea, and maybe somewhat answering the previous question from the other side of the SCIS, was that sort of centralisation of bringing all those things together, putting all that information in one place, and then all of us looking at it in the same way. So we had a sort of almost single source of truth, which was possibly more current than a lot of the information that we were using otherwise. We, given our ambition and the support and leadership that we have in Glasgow, we had jumped slightly ahead, perhaps by already using the ClimateView platform and going into real detail and kind of pushing the platform perhaps outside its comfort zone a little bit, asking it to do more than it was perhaps geared up to do at that point. So when the other authorities came on board, I think it's fair to say there were different reactions to it. It was a much bigger challenge for some than others to get on board and to pull all the information together. So I like to think that Glasgow certainly helped to advocate for this approach. And the benefits that we've seen, others are now starting to see. But as I said in my summary, you know, there's issues that have been identified as part of this process that are leading to us looking to work together on these solutions, and these are not really a particular issue for one local authority, it's for all local authorities. So I think there's constant flow of information backwards and forwards, and some of that is in the presence of the SCIS, and Clare, you won't mind me saying, some of that is between the cities and not in the presence of the SCIS. And we're constantly thinking, this is great, the SCIS is helping us. We're constantly thinking, what do we need to do with the SCIS to really push this forward? So there is constant communication going on all the time. And I think the virtue of this approach is that we now have that sort of fulcrum around which we're all circling, and that we're all working together into that point, and that point is covering everything that we're trying to do.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. And again, yeah, go ahead, please.
Thanks to everyone for your presentation. I'm not sure if you can hear me. Thanks for your presentations. This is maybe a question for Gavin. You mentioned, I think the phrase you used was an investment engine that would then be kind of developed and incorporated into the platform. So I'm curious to hear maybe from yourself or from Tomer and Clare about how you do see the future of like potentially incorporating private finance into this platform, whether there is a space for that and how it could be used. Obviously it's early days, but interested to hear your thoughts.
So perhaps if I just reflect quickly first on that. So what I had mentioned was I think what you're thinking about is the delivery vehicle, which I guess needs an engine. But what we've done is use the platform essentially to cost our action. So we know that our pathways to net zero, one of them costs about £23.5 billion to achieve, the other one's closer to £38 billion. And we know that of that sum total, about £10 billion is required for our transition and the infrastructure to facilitate the transition to zero carbon heating in our city. And the platform has enabled us to understand what that quantum is. I don't think we intend to use the platform necessarily to directly bring in investment. It's been essentially the data and the information that's allowed us to then go to the market and say, this is the quantum of what we're trying to achieve. This is the scale that we're trying to achieve and the pace that we're trying to achieve it at. And these are the types of delivery agents, vehicles that we need to come into this, the type of institutional investors that can bring that capital, but also to Pourya's point about also speaking to the government about how do you bring that public sector funding in to de-risk that investment as well. So how do we ensure that the actions that we have translate into real infrastructure that you can help de-risk? So the platform in and of itself won't give us investment, but the information that we've drawn from the platform has allowed us to then go to the market with that offer.
Well, I can add to that thanks to the work Glasgow has done, other cities have done, that also, as we started saying, it's a shared language. Therefore, we have more information on CapEx, OpEx, on different things. So that means that the next local authority, the next city going as far as Glasgow, will actually be served somewhat of the hard work that has been done. So we can slowly but surely bring the platform further and further towards getting, well, as Gavin said, getting better and better insights so that we can then go to market.
Fantastic. Wonderful. Any other questions here in the room? Yeah, please go ahead if you could maybe.
I'm based in Sweden. I'm working with Swedish cities, trying to help them to reach carbon neutrality, which they've set as goals. And one area that we see as problematic is that in most cases the climate budget is not enough for the interventions that they need to do or plan. And then based on the research that we've done as part of the Urban Twin Transition Center that we lead, is that financing needs to come from elsewhere, maybe within the local authority as well, but also then talking about like the private sector and so on. Has this common language or platform informed that somehow on how the different departments can work together in addressing which interventions to plan, or where we can use which budgets we can use to plan those interventions?
Sounds like it's back to you, Gavin, or maybe Cabinet Secretary. Yeah, please.
From a government perspective, is that in the time that I've been in post and looking at the various costs associated with climate action, that's goes back to what Gavin was talking about. It's about creating a market, right? Because government money can't do it alone, but government money can provide some the de-risking element of it, and then shows the actual government commitment to things, but also to crowd in public finance. You really need to create a market. So this is why I'm quite interested to see. I think that the tool that's here allows all the 32 local authorities to effectively look at their plans and look at the costs associated with their plans, but also allows that collaboration so that you could actually say to investors, well, here's a plan for how Scotland wants to decarbonise our major cities. Maybe Glasgow's going slightly, ahead of one, but the next one might be Edinburgh, the next one might be Aberdeen, whatever. And I think that when you're able to do that, you're able to say to private investors, it's a pipeline of work that you can effectively bid for. Really interesting. I know Glasgow's got connections with what they did in Bristol with regard to a heat network. And the lessons from Bristol that they said was, if there's any advice they would give to other people doing what they did, in creating a heat network would be to buddy together with other cities, so that you're effectively saying to investors, it's not just the one city that you'll be unlocking all this that you work into. It would be a cascade of different projects for many, many years. And that's why I'm interested, you know, in hearing from the other local authorities as to how they've used this service. Because we're following Glasgow's lead in terms of their net zero ambition and what they might want to do in decarbonising heat. Who's the next city? And who's the next city after that? Because then you're actually able to go out and actually crowd in private finance. That's my very, you know, like tangential view on what I've been hearing.
Fantastic. Gavin, did you want to jump in as well and reflect on the last question?
Yeah, so I think you're absolutely right. We came to the same conclusion. There is no world in which the local authority can fund this from its budgets. There's no world in which the government can entirely fund this transition for the whole country from its budgets, and the private sector has a role to play. We initially did some work prior to working with ClimateView and Mott MacDonald, which estimated Glasgow's net zero transition would be about £40 billion. So it was actually really satisfying when we did the ClimateView work that the figures came out very close to that in the £38 billion. And given us that costed pathway, it was like a quantum leap for us in terms of the realisation that we could spend a lot of money, as public sector and local government often does, doing feasibility studies and pilot projects and small things in the hope that they'll be upscaled. It moved us to talking about the actual the full delivery package, and as the minister says, taking that out to the market and being able to say this is an entire suite of investable projects that you can get involved in. And we're focused on our heat networks, which is a huge, probably the most significant piece of infrastructure delivery that the city will see in decades. But that there's also energy efficiency works and retrofit works and housing works that need to be done, all of which continues to add up towards that £38 billion. And what we don't want to do is to spend public money doing abortive work that when a private sector partner comes in, they're going to do their own design work and their own feasibility anyway. So we're able to go to the market with this quantity and say, this is what we're looking to engage on. And the response has been fantastic. In fact, overwhelming somewhat, the amount of times our door has been knocked. We want to be your partner and trying to go through that process. But it's really exciting. And the real challenge for us now is to ensure that we bring that private sector money and contribution in a way that ensures delivery of alleviation of fuel poverty and child poverty and reduction in climate emissions, and make sure that it's delivered as a public sector, public good project with private sector finance.
Wonderful. Well, we are now at time. I'd really like to thank, and please give a warm round of applause for all of our panelists who shared their knowledge with us today. I think we've heard how multi-level governance needs to go beyond the conceptual, beyond the ideas. It needs to be practical, and we've found in this example a very practical example of how it's been put into practice. And not only that, but how implementing a multi-level model really does lead to multiple co-benefits, right? So it's not just the governance, it's not just the decision-making, but it's also now attracting investment. It's providing a platform, right, for engagement with multiple sectors and multiple actors, and really providing a scaling effect that can also snowball right into other local authorities and provide opportunities for scaling up and bundling projects together. So really quite keen to see where this goes. We're very, as Regions 4, along with ICLEI and other large global networks, happy to share these kinds of shining lighthouse examples from around the world to see how they can inspire other subnational governments and cities from around the world. And with that, I think we can bring the session to a close. Again, thank you to all our panelists. Thank you to all of you here in the room, and thank you to all of those who are connected from around the world. And looking forward to connecting with you again on the road to COP30 in Berlin.
Thank you.